picture a highway, a super highway of radio waves. Radio waves on which video signals can travel, voice signals, and data signals can travel. Now, on this multi-lane highway, you have slow lanes, you have fast lanes. Now, 2G is a slow lane, 5G is a super fast lane, 4G is a fast lane, 3G is virtually gone these days. It's a semi-fast lane.
India's first ever 5G spectrum auctions concluded after 7 days of bidding between 4 players. These 4 players were Bharti, Airtel, Reliance Jio, Vodafone Idea and Adani. Hi, I'm Saurabh Kumar, and in this video we're going to discuss about the 5G spectrum auction. Government has netted a record rupees 1.5 lakh crore through this auction process. Before we delve deep into this video, let's first talk about the technicality.
Right now, all the bands, incidentally, you need to realize are technology neutral. So all available bands that were auctioned this time can be used for 2G, 4G or 5G. The classic 5G bands would be 3.3, 3.6, which is known as the C band. Now, this is a capacity band. So is 26 gigahertz, which is a high capacity band. So ideally, they're good when typically in a 5G network, there's a lot of data consumption that is happening. There's a lot of video consumption that is happening. So you need high capacity bands which can process and transmit that data at record speeds. It is a defined geography, so there are 22 defined telecom service geographies. So there are 22 such market service areas, which are popularly known as telecom circles. So there are metro circles, there are category A circles, there are category B circles, there are category C circles. The metros would obviously be the circles with the maximum urban and with the biggest consumption. They are the markets which offer maximum revenue opportunity for the telcos.
Now that we have got a sense about the tech part of it, let's see who got what.
Jio has emerged the biggest biggest buyer of 5G airwaves. They bought spectrum worth almost over $11 billion, about 88,000 plus crores. And Vodafone acquired spectrum worth close to 19,000 crores. Airtel bought spectrum worth over 43,000 crores. And Adani bought a very tiny chunk of spectrum, just about 212 crores worth of spectrum, purely for their captive requirements. Jio was the only telco which bought expensive 700 megahertz spectrum. They're the only guys. They paid about 40,000 crores just to get pan-India 700 spectrum. On top of that, they bought pan-India 3.3 gigahertz. They bought pan-India 26 gigahertz. And they bought selections of 1800 band. They bought selections of 800 as well, right? So they pretty much broad-based their entire spectrum holdings. So they bought a mix of high quality coverage spectrum, which is 700, and quality high capacity spectrum, which is 3.3 to 26 gigahertz. Airtel primarily concentrated on 3.3 and 26 gigahertz, classic capacity 5G, high capacity 5G spectrum. They did not, sort of boost they did not buy any 700 megahertz like Jio. Vodafone, they are obviously strapped for cash. So they focused on, acquiring again, mid-band, which is C-band 3.3, 3.6 and 26 in their 17 priority markets. So essentially, they've got their main markets which generate over 95% of their revenues covered with 5G spectrum. So that's the way. Adani acquired just about 400 units of 26 gigahertz, which was the cheapest spectrum in this particular auction, purely for their captive consumption.
But why was there such a disparity in spectrum bidding, and what was the strategy used by the various companies?
The difference between Jio's spectrum cost and Airtel's spectrum cost is the pan-India 700, for which Jio paid an additional nearly 40,000 crores. See, 700 is excellent coverage spectrum, which is perfect for in-building coverage. Inside for indoor broadband, high-speed broadband connectivity, it is very good. So from a 5G context, you immediately get superior coverage within a building. Also, it's perfect for rural in the sense you require, because it is a very efficient band, you require a lesser number of towers. So your operating cost declines. So it is a more efficient band for, offering 5G in, say, rural geographies. But the point is, you might have the coverage, but then there might be no takers for an expensive 5G connection in rural India. So ultimately, Jio will need to monetize this additional 40,000 crores that they've spent on 700.
Adani bid for 5G airways in the 26 GHz band to be used for its captive private networks. What exactly is captive spectrum?
Captive usage is typically where, it's like a captive coal mine, where it's a 5G network, but it will be purely used by a single user, as in a single enterprise. Enterprise services is supposed to generate at least 40% of the overall 5G revenue pie. So telcos had panicked that they would lose out on that revenue. But what has interestingly happened is that the government, while they have said that we will allow direct spectrum allotments to, tech companies, independent enterprises for their captive use, it has not given any specific timeline. So the government has said that before we do the allotment, the government will, as in the DOT, will do a demand study, and then the TRAI will, based on the findings of that demand study, will come out with certain recommendations, including possibly some sort of a pricing formula for such direct allotments. So obviously there is a lot of uncertainty around that, and that process could take a year or two. So indirectly, the telcos have got a first mover advantage. So that may be one of the reasons why the telcos bid so aggressively for 5G spectrum, so that they have a year to a 2-year head start over the independent private tech companies in offering these, captive private network solutions.
But when will you actually get to use 5G?
Consumers in some markets, in the metros or in some of the urban markets, could experience 5G as early as October, November. And of course, coming to affordability right now, like I said, handsets, only 4 to 5% of the smartphones are 5G enabled, and they cost a bomb. So prices will need to come down. And also there is a possibility that telcos, because they've invested such big sums in spectrum, they would want to look at monetizing this 5G through 5G services.
Will 5G change telephony in India?
5G, unlike the earlier generations of mobile broadband technology, as in 3G or 4G, is not about, using the technology to only connect, smartphones or mobile phones to an internet network. This 5G is about connecting everything, machines, cars, smartphones, consumer electronics. Everything can be connected to a high-speed broadband network. That's the beauty of 5G.
What happened to the whole Adani versus Ambani debate?
He's clearly said he's not here for consumer mobility. So unless he comes into consumer mobility, there is no real battle with Jio or Airtel or anyone else for that matter. So his entire thing, and he's also not coming into commercial private captive network rollouts for third parties. He's purely doing it for his own requirement. So right now he is obviously holding his holding his cards pretty close to his chest, and as one would expect. So this entire thing about Adani versus Ambani, I think, is yet to really pan out, because we would get a signal of something emerging if he enters the consumer mobility space. And given the fact that we have 3 national well-entrenched telcos with massive spectrum holdings, it doesn't really make sense for an Adani to come in with a greenfield, and roll out a greenfield network. So possibly it would make sense for a company, somebody like Adani, to do an M&A, So obviously through the inorganic route, if he wants to come into consumer mobility, that's a different ballgame, but that is yet to happen. So like we say, picture abhi baki hai.